Hi guys, Olive here. Today I'd like to talk to you about what I read in January 2016, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm planning to read for February 2016. The first book that I finished was one that I carried over from the end of 2015, and that was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I have listened to this one on audio, half read it when I ran out of patience to continue listening to the audiobook and just wanted to shove the content into my brain. But the audiobook was narrated by Stephen Crosley. Stephen Crosley did a great job. It is a great audiobook. I was just voracious and needed to have the content immediately. This is a very big book on BookTube because it is a really, really good book. In case you have not heard of it, this book follows a young magician named Kel who can travel in between parallel Londons that have varying degrees of power and magic left over, and somehow he ends up in possession of a relic from the London, Black London, that went bad, where magic corrupted it. You also follow a young thief named Lila, and of course they run into each other and have all sorts of escapades. I highly, highly enjoyed this book. It was very fast-paced. I could see that it was written as a standalone, but this one actually has a sequel, and then we'll have a third book, so it will be a trilogy, coming out this month. I pre-ordered it the minute I finished this one because I am not quite done with this world yet, and I wanted to be in possession of the second one. I gave this one 4 stars, highly recommend it. The next book I finished was a graphic novel called Lena Finkel's Magic Beryl. I normally do not count graphic novels toward my overall reading count, but this one was so long and it took me forever to get through that I ended up just counting it toward my reading goal. I gave this one 2 stars. At the beginning, I liked it. It is about an immigrant woman who came to the United States from Russia when she was a child, and she grew up in the United States, and really it follows her life history, but then in the present day, she's divorced and has re-entered the dating scene. The main character is a writer. It really felt like it was at least semi-autobiographical, if not entirely autobiographical. And it's really just about how hard it is to date in New York in your 40s. It's not like I was unwilling to learn about that, but it was just really dull. I get really tired of reading books set in New York City by people in New York City having New York City problems. It's the same thing over and over. People in Brooklyn having failings. So yeah, I got really bored with this one. 2 stars. I would not recommend it. The next book I read for the 24 and 48 hour readathon, which was a lot of fun. That book is Hunger by Elise Blackwell. This book takes place during the Siege of Leningrad, and the main character is part of a group of scientists that are trying their best to preserve this collection of seeds and different plants from around the world, even when the entire city is starving. They all kind of band together and have this both spoken and unspoken agreement to protect these seeds, these organisms at all costs from the people in the city who are making food out of things that should never be food. We'll just say that. This is obviously the paperback release of this book. So in the back of this book, there is a conversation with Elise Blackwell, as well as some reading group questions that are often included in paperback releases. And I read the conversation with the author, Elise Blackwell, and it said that the main character of this book was described by one reviewer as being one of the most unsympathetic characters of all time, and none of his actions were justifiable. And my response to that is, you didn't live during the Siege of Leningrad. How would you know what is acceptable and not acceptable when your entire city is on the precipice of death? The main character in this book is one of the scientists in this group of scientists that are trying to preserve those seeds, and he's married to another scientist. You find out how much he loves his wife, but you also learn his weaknesses before the siege and his weaknesses during the siege. You see him make mistakes. You see his humanity boiled down to its very essentials when he's trying to survive, when he's dealing with loss, when he's dealing with the war that's going on. It makes me very crotchety when I hear a reviewer talking about how bad a character is when he's being pushed to the limits of what it means to be a decent person. I have no idea how I would behave during a siege situation. I would like to think that I would remain a good person, but I don't know. I don't know that anyone can say how they would behave in a situation of very serious deprivation. I don't know, obviously that really offended me. But overall, this was an enjoyable read. It's not as good as City of Thieves, which also takes place during the siege of Leningrad, but it's so short, it's really worth a read. I really enjoyed it. After I finished that book during the 24 and 48 hour readathon, I turned my full attention to the audiobook that I was listening to at the time, which was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, narrated by Morven Christie. I was really starting to get into this audiobook when the readathon started, and I at one point just wanted to become immersed in this so much that I borrowed my husband's fancy gaming headphones, sat on my reading chair, and just sat there like this, listening to the book for like 2 hours, and it was so enjoyable. Not only is this book fantastic, not only is it a fantastic winter read because it takes place in Iceland and follows the last person, who was a woman who was executed in Iceland. You focus on her story, but the narrator of this audiobook, oh my gosh, you have to listen to this on audiobook if you are interested in this book. She does a fantastic job with the Icelandic names. I obviously went out and bought a copy after I finished it because I loved it so much. But just browsing through the pages, I would have had no idea how to pronounce some of these words. I don't speak any of that language. But Morven Christie obviously got fantastic direction when it came to pronouncing the Icelandic names, and it made the whole experience more immersive. Her narration was so emotional and so heartfelt. I was just sitting there like coming to tears, hearing the words of this woman, obviously fictional, who was talking about the days leading up to her death. Obviously, you know how this book ends from the very beginning. She's given a death sentence. That death sentence is carried out. This was an actual woman who lived, but this is a fictional tale of her life. So you know going through exactly what's going to happen, but how you get there, ooh, very surprising, very interesting. This was my first 5-star book of the year. The next book I finished I did not love so much, and that was The Librarian by Mikhail Lazarev. I buddy read this with Michael from Knowledge Lost. Oh, I really liked the beginning of this book. I really like the beginning of this book. The premise of this book is that there are these books written by this long-forgotten Soviet propagandist writer, but reading the books from start to finish in one sitting, while paying close attention, you can't just skim the words, will give you a drug-like quality depending on what specific book it is. So one book will send you into a murderous rage. Another book will help you create memories of your past if you did not have a great past. And then there's one elusive book that is the Book of Meaning, which will tell you the meaning of life. And then there are these clans of readers who essentially fight to the death for possession and the right to use these books. That premise sounds fascinating. It really does. In the first 100, 150 pages, I was totally engaged. But there is battle scene after battle scene after battle scene. There is a ton of gratuitous violence, and I just couldn't hang. I ended up giving it 2 stars, probably more like 2.5 because I did enjoy the beginning parts, but I could not bring myself to give it 3 stars on Goodreads. Next, I read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for my project, A Grown Woman Finally Reads Harry Potter. I am going to do an entire video specifically about this, so I'm not going to say anything about it right now. Keep an eye out for that video though. The audiobook I picked up after finishing Burial Rites is called Crimson Bounds by Rosamund Hodge. This was narrated by Elizabeth Nolden. This is a young adult book, kind of romance and fantasy book. The premise of this book is that there is an evil forest, at the center of which is a evil creature being called the Devourer. Anyone who goes into the forest can be marked by a forestborn or someone who serves this evil devourer. Once they are marked, they become a bloodbound and eventually will turn into a forestborn. The bloodbound, and then obviously the forestborn to an even greater extent, have superhuman powers, strength, speed, etc. They are better than humans. They also have a tie to the forest so they can see the forest creatures and feel the forest around them. The main character in this book gets tricked by a forestborn and turns into a bloodbound very early in the book. She was talking to the forestborn in the first place because she has always had a desire to destroy the forest. This forest that is a menace to everyone's life, she wants it gone. So she thinks by getting closer to this forestborn, she can destroy the forest. Obviously, she just ends up as a bloodbound, but that desire to destroy the forest continues. And that continues through the whole book. She is assigned to be someone's bodyguard that she hates, and then things happen from there. I do not want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but I freaking loved this book. Fun story about how I found this book. I was looking at people's reviews of Uprooted, particularly negative reviews, because I love that book, and people who don't like it, I can somewhat understand why they don't like it, but I was just interested in hearing people hate on a book I liked a lot, because that's fun. And I looked at one review, and one person said, the reason why I liked Uprooted were the same reasons why I disliked Crimson Bound. I was like, ooh, I gotta read that. So I put it on my TBR, and when I saw it was available on audiobook through my library, I picked it up, and I'm so glad I did. A lot of the reasons why I liked Uprooted are the reasons why I like Crimson Bound. So if you did not like Uprooted, do not pick up Crimson Bound. And it is YA. It's not as explicit as Uprooted is, which is why I have a little bit of a problem classifying Uprooted as YA. But this was an enthralling book. The story was so original. It's really fast paced. I was actually listening to it right before class, and a major plot twist happened, and I was just dying on the inside the whole way through class. I gave this one 5 stars. Another great audiobook pick for the month. And then to round out the month, I picked up a short book called The Festival of Insignificance by Milan Kundera. This was translated from French by Linda Asher. This is very, very tiny. I liked it. I gave it 3 stars, but the whole time I was reading it, I was just feeling nostalgic for The Unbearable Lightness of Being and just wished I was rereading that. This has been called a culmination of Milan Kundera's entire life work. I think this is the last book he plans on writing. He is in his 80s, I believe. But obviously there were some references to a lot of his other work, which I have only read The Unbearable Lightness of Being. So I'm going to be interested to see if some of the aspects of this book become clearer as I sift through his backlist. I am still sifting my way through The 900 Days, The History of the Siege of Leningrad. I've had a difficult month. It's been hard to try to convince myself to pick up a very, very depressing book when I'm already going through a really depressing time. But I really do want to finish this one. The audiobook I'm currently listening to is Euphoria by Lily King. This is about 3 anthropologists in New Guinea who are studying the natives. It's based off of the very famous anthropologist Margaret Mead's life and her relationships with her first and second husbands. So there's a bit of a love triangle that happens with these anthropologists as they are studying these tribes in New Guinea. I am really enjoying it so far. The narration is done by a man and a woman in their respective parts, which I really appreciate. I think I am halfway through this. I am really looking forward to seeing how this story concludes. I am about halfway through with A Kata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a book about an albino African girl, Nigerian specifically, who discovers that she has magical or juju powers and her forays into that area. I am loving this. This is another YA book. I seem to be craving that since I'm going through a lot in my life to just have simple, fun reads that are really engaging. And this is definitely hitting the spot. I'm not very far into Stork Mountain by Miroslav Penkov, but that is one I will be finishing this month. Once I am finished listening to Euphoria by Lily King, I am going to be listening to Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I have been meaning to get to Pride and Prejudice forever, and I'm really excited to do so this month. I'm going to be continuing with my read-through of Harry Potter, so I'll be reading the second book in the series, The Chamber of Secrets. This does not have a dust jacket. This is my husband's very beat-up copy. I wasn't a huge fan of the enhanced ebooks, so I will not be purchasing any more of those. I'll just be reading through, again, my husband's very beat up copies. I will actually be reading this with Phoebe over at Officially Phoebe's TV. Phoebe reached out to me saying that she was also going to be reading this book this month, and since she knew about my project to read through all of them, she reached out and suggested that we read it together, which I thought was a fabulous idea. I will be reading Loris with Kate from Kate Howe. And my third and final buddy read of the month will be reading The Last Werewolf by Glenn Duncan with Elena over at Elena Reads Books. I'm also hoping to read The Girl with Glass Feet by Ali Shaw. I really wanted to read this one during the winter. It doesn't really feel like winter outside right now, but maybe during the month of February, it will feel cold enough to read this book. I'm not wishing for the cold. I just feel as though it's appropriate for reading this book. And then currently on hold at the library, which I'm pretty sure is ready for pickup, is The Queen of the Night by Alexander Chee. This one is so hyped. Everyone is so excited about this one. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I am sure you will hear me gushing about it. So those were all the books I read in January, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm going to be reading in February. Please let me know if you have any thoughts on any of these books. I'd love to chat with you about them. If you'd like to find me anywhere on social media, all the links are down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good day. Bye.